Today's episode is brought to you by AOS Kitchens, the South's leading outdoor kitchen design and installation specialists. Welcome to another episode of the Meet and Greet Barbecue Podcast. Today we're talking to Simon, who is a butcher for Macknade farm shop down in Kent. We're going to be talking about all things meat, secondary cuts, economical cuts, as well as kind of Simon's career in chefing and his love for barbecue in general. So without much further ado, here's Simon. Well, welcome, Simon, to the Meet and Greet Barbecue Podcast. It's absolutely fantastic to have you on. For everyone that doesn't know who you are, please introduce yourself to our listeners.
Yeah, hello. So, my name's Simon. Currently a butcher. I've been a butcher now for guessing about 7 years. Time goes too fast. I'm losing track. I run a lovely craft butchery in flavours in Kent. Have been running the butchery now for about 5 years. Specialise in all whole carcass butchery. So that means to a lot of us that we don't buy anything in the box. It comes in as a whole animal. We break it down to customer requirements or whatever we want that broken down to. So whole chickens, whole pigs, whole beef, whole lamb, you name it. That's where we do it. Zero importation. All the meat is directly from farms to abattoir to us. So we've got 100% traceability on absolutely everything that we're trying to do. So that's kind of the USP where I'm at right now. Background, I chefed for best part of about 20 years in the industry, starting off in high-end fine dining in Kent, and then moved my way up into London. I was fortunate enough to do some stages with Ramsay. I worked for Michel Roux as a sous chef for a little while. Wow. Up in Parliament Square. So more luck of the draw than anything else. I worked bloody hard in my younger age, and I was lucky to fall on my feet and sort of land some really, really good jobs. Finished off the chefing career back in Kent, opening restaurants in Tunbridge Wells. So we had a restaurant what formerly was called the 26, and then we later on opened a restaurant called the Beacon, which are two relatively famous restaurants within Kent. And then, to be honest, to sort of keep it relatively short on it, I didn't lose passion for the trade. I lost passion for the hours. I think is probably the truth. I would never lose passion for cooking. Cooking is that's what I do. That's not just wasn't just my job. It's my hobby. But I've got 3 young girls and a wife, and trying to work at 6 in the morning till 2 in the morning was not great. That's the polite way of putting it. Let's just be honest with it. So that's really kind of in a nutshell. That's my kind of career path. I mean, there's a hell of a lot more to it, but we would need a 4-hour meeting for that one. But so yeah, that's me.
Perfect. Well, yeah, it's great to have you on, Simon. And I think what I was really interested. Obviously, we met at Sizzle Fest, not so long ago, and we started having a conversation around obviously butchery. And I think one of the things I was quite excited to talk to you about today was where you said you literally have whole carcass come in, nothing's boxed, it's all customer orders. We've spoken about it a lot on the podcast. You have your traditional, your briskets, your Boston butts, the traditional kind of low and slow cuts and things like that. But I'm actually quite interested to hear from you, with your chefing career, but also your expertise as a butcher. What are those other cuts? What are those alternatives, perhaps the lesser known or the cheaper alternatives that can still, be fantastic to cook on the barbecue, still give the same great flavors as all of these traditional cuts that we would normally go for?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. I mean, I'm super pleased you asked that question, because that's something that I'm really trying to push in my butchery right now, is coming away from, I'm going to use the terminology primal cuts. I know it's the wrong terminology because primals will revert to sort of sirloins and ribeyes, but in the barbecue world, to me, a primal cut would be your kind of your briskets, your Boston butts, that kind of thing, which everybody knows. Every barbecue book in the world has got a brisket recipe, a short rib recipe. Great, yes, like you say, brilliant flavors, But let's start with one thing. So first of all, brisket I find exceptionally hard to cook, and I think every barbecue enthusiast will probably back me up on that one. To get a perfect brisket is, very hard. So actually, we started looking, like you say, other cuts in the butchery. So let's take the shoulder of beef. So in the trade, 4/4 of beef. So the 4/4 contains 1,001 amazing cuts. So we have a quick run through. So starting off, what's really in fashion at the moment, it's a great one. So we'll start with the shin. So my boys in the butchery will kill me for saying this because they take the mick out of me. I've got a proper old school team that are going to rip the mick out of me for this one. But Thor's hammer is massive on social media right now, and I'm seeing.
I've seen it everywhere.
Oh, not just everywhere. So you've got some of the biggest players in the meat industry in the market. So Longcroft and Old are actually selling boxed up Thor's hammers ready to go. It's mind blowing, but it's a great cut. So traditionally shinner beef. Let's go back old English style. So shinner beef braised, nice red wine jus, that kind of thing. Carrots, onions, all of that nice stew. But it's now becoming that real sort of fashionable on a barbecue, low and slow. A friend of mine did one the other day, which blew me away. Actually, he braised it on his ceramic barbecue, and then smoked it heavily over Guinness, and then pulled it straight into the Guinness, and then made that and then put the meat into a pie on the barbecue, of course. And when you kind of look at social media, you go, "Wow, that's insane. That's next level barbecue to me." So there's one cut that I think I'd like to say it was underrated, but 5 months ago, yeah, it was quite underrated, but it's become quite fashionable now. We can sell. Well, we don't actually have that many committee by whole carcass, but I could probably sell 3 or 4, 5 or 6, maybe even a week, quite happily of those. So
and would you have said 6 months ago that you would have sold one of those a week?
Yeah, even trying to sell shin on the bone 6 months ago would have been near on impossible. People want a convenience bone out, shin ready to go. But since that rise of social media and this Thor's hammer kind of hitting the market hard, every second post on Instagram at the moment is like a Thor's hammer. It's like, wow, what's going on?
Do you find there's a trend in terms of popularity as well that kind of links to cost?
Yeah.
So supply and demand, I assume.
Yeah. Well, do you know what? Well, I don't want to divulge off the original question too far, but cost is a great one, and maybe that's something that we might bring up a little bit later on. But of course, we're living in a current climate where economics is hitting hard, isn't it? And we're seeing that across. With my wife, we own 2 businesses, and we're seeing that impact in that. When it comes to the physical cost of everything from rates to you name it, to purchasing. I've got a coffee shop just to purchasing coffees and syrups, but that goes back into the butchery related. Yeah, of course it does, and that's where these secondary cuts are absolutely huge for us. Because not only can we give something that's absolutely quality, but we can also give something that's more economic and less risky than a brisket. I think is probably again for me. So you still go back to the original question with that. My favourite at the moment is actually chuck. Or chuck steak, but rather than, I don't know, a lot of butcheries traditionally would, you'd roll the whole thing, so you'd take the chuck off the bone for argument's sake, and you've got almost like a double muscle. So you've got a muscle that sits on top, then you've got a seam, then you've got like the round muscle, which is in effect the continuation from the ribeye that sits on there. So within the butchery, again, maximizing what we can get from one cut. So we'll take that seam off the top, clean that seam up really nicely, so any of the sinews will come off, and that will go into Denver steaks, which we'll talk about in a moment, but bloody brilliant steaks. But then the chuck, so we take the fat, so the fat that sits on top over the blade and the juice fillet, we take that and we roll that back on over the chuck eye. So you've got and traditionally, I suppose you'd know it as a chuck roast. But for me, wow, the flavour on that, you put that on a barbecue, 150 degrees C, give it 3, 4, maybe 5 hours, just real low and, well, say low and slow, 150 degrees C, not so low. But I think, again, what the controversial world of the barbecue world is real no, but I think it takes a higher temperature and it actually prefers cooking at that little higher temperature brisket. It renders the fat down perfectly. Still doesn't dry out because there's enough fat in the muscle for it not to dry out. But when you get that and you pull that into, say, like tacos or something like that, wow, the flavour of that is just mind blowing. And again, I had a very good friend. I'm not going to name drop, but I had a very good friend who owns a very well known chili company. In the south,
you'll find name drop, by the way.
A good friend of mine, Carrington's, who's just happens to be.
I love Carrington's. Carrington's.
Well, check out his socials. He bought the chuck roll from us last week. I didn't have any brisket that I thought was good enough to be barbecued, basically. And we'll go through. I can explain that later, but. I said to him, look, why don't you look at this? This has to be my favourite cut. And he texted me a couple of days ago, just like, wow, I'm just blown away. The flavour, the ease of the cooking, this thing's incredible. So chuck roll is my #1 go-to for low and slowish barbecue. So yeah, chuck roll, brilliant. but then that sort of carries on, doesn't it? So I'm visualizing it as this shoulder of beef. So you've got the chuck sitting here. Then I don't know how much you visualize, you've got the blade bone that sits on top. So on top of the blade, where you've got that T-bone section of the blade, you've got then two muscles that sit either side. So one muscle sits one side, is what we know old school in the trade as feather blade. And then, let's be honest, the revolution, how many years, but it's got to be a few years now, what, 5, 6, maybe even 10 years, revolution of the flat iron steak. Yeah. That's just skyrocketed. And I think, first of all, more economical. It is a secondary cut. It's a feather blade. It's a potentially it was an old school stewing cut. And then you've got the likes of the flat iron restaurants opening up, London bound, putting this massive name onto this steak, and that's incredible. What a steak! It's got the flavour of a ribeye. It's got amazing texture, and it's about 3/4 the price of a primal cut.
Wow,
so that's incredible. So
from a texture point of view, then, so what would that be similar to? What other steak would that be similar to?
I'm gonna, again, it's subjective to opinion, isn't it? But I'm gonna go more sirloin, probably more rump. It's never going to be as tender as a fillet. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
It's a working muscle, isn't it? It's the muscle it sits on there. It's not going to have that tenderness to it. But if it's cooked correctly, and again, this is subject to opinion, but in my eyes, and I'm not even, I'm going to get killed by most chefs on this. I'm not even going to say rare, a medium rare to medium for it. Medium, probably more medium, because it just allows you to cook out some of that more muscular areas in it. But the key for it, as long as it's rested, it's sat and it's left on the side. So many people make this huge mistake of put the steak in a pan on a barbecue, cook it really nice and hot. They get it cooked absolutely perfect, right? They take it out, they whack it on the plate, and they try and eat it. And they're like, oh, this is really tough. This is tough. It's not relaxed, does it? It hasn't had any time to sit. It needs to relax. Yeah. And this goes really, really key importance for any of the secondary steaks. So the Denver steaks, the flat iron steaks. The key to making them tender is relaxing them. Just make sure that they sit. Don't cover them with tin foil. You've already cooked it perfectly, so you don't want to cook it in further. Just let it rest. And then you'll have a tenderness of a rump or a sirloin, in my eyes. And again, it's also with it, I'm going to be a little bit arrogant, I suppose, but it's the skill of the butcher. Because if that secondary cut isn't cleaned up properly, so if a lot of that sinew that's on the bottom is left on that flat iron, for argument's sake, well, that sinew is never going to cook. And if you imagine when you put it on the barbecue, it's going to contract, and that sinew is just going to pull it even tighter. So a lot of it is in the skill of the butchery. It's making sure that the butchers understand how that should be cleaned out, how it should be prepared properly. And I can go really in depth on it. It's not only the skill in the butchery, but it's also the skill in understanding the animal, making sure that just hung long enough. There's so many elements that goes into getting these cuts correct, and it's not just the cooking, if that makes sense.
So yeah, no, absolutely. And again, this is exactly why we wanted you to come on, just to kind of really go, a bit more into depth. But also, let's say for me, I'm not a complete newbie into barbecue or going in. I quite often go to my local butcher, but equally I'm by no means an expert. So let's say for me if I'm going in and you're talking about cleaning up the secondary cuts properly, visually for me as the customer, what should I be looking for to see that actually it's been cleaned up properly, and I'm not going to get
bobbed off with,
exactly. Bobbed off is the right thing.
No, I'm not going to beat around the bush, because it's really important that for me that my customers have the confidence to understand, the confidence to go into butchers and actually ask, because we're never going to get the trade going any further if the customers haven't got confidence to come and see us. So I don't know really explain it. I would say with the flat iron, it's what we know in the trade, or as I know in the trade, as the sinews, so the connective tissues. So if it's got like a really big line of like shiny looking material on it, then that's not going to cook down. If it's fat, then that's a different story. That's going to cook. Do you know, that's such a difficult question to answer, because I can visualize it. I can see it in front of me.
So for me, it's like so for me, I call it like the silver skin. It's kind of like
the silver skin. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not going to use the word gristle, because that gristle is counterproductive in terms of what the cut is. So if you've got a piece of shin, well, it's going to be full of what looks like gristle, because that's the nature of that cut. But you're not going to cook shin as a steak. So you're going to,
of course.
So it's very much on those kind of cuts. If like sirloin, go onto the primal cuts, is a great one. If you look at the back of the sirloin, there's a great big line of silver skin that kind of sits on that top. Now, if you go into, again, butchers are going to watch this might kill me because it's the way it is, but I like to make sure that on the butchery, before that goes on the counter, we take that skin out. So you remove the part of the fat that goes on the back, you remove that silver skin. So when you cook it on a barbecue, all of it's going to cook. You haven't got that bit of silver skin sitting there that's going to be tough and nasty.
Yeah.
But it's a difficult one in the trade because that comes at cost element, because we're taking that out. Obviously, we're paying, as a butcher, we're paying for the whole thing.
Yeah.
But in my eyes, to get repeat custom and to get customer confidence, well, I want the customer to have the best product that we can physically deliver, and that it has to be, in my eyes, it's a finished product that the customer can take home and enjoy, and they haven't got to worry about working to get that perfect product. And that's the way I see it in our butchery. On the flip side of it, we do get customers that want the experience of actually doing a butchery home, so they can always ask, and we'll let them do. Of course, they can do that. So yeah, I think that, it is a hard question to answer, because every steak's going to have a slightly different thing to look out for. But predominantly it's that silver skin on the steak that you want to make sure it's cleaned up, especially on the secondary cuts such as your flat irons and your Denver steaks. Denver especially, because we think that sits on top of your chuck. Your chuck's exceptionally a tough muscle, so if that Denver's isn't cleaned up properly, then it will run the risk of being a very tough cut. We take a good half hour to ensure that every little bit on that Denver is cleaned, so when you get it, it's just this perfect steak that you can take home and cook straight away. So I don't know, it's kind of a roundabout answer really, but
no, it sounds like a labor of love the way that you do it.
I think I don't think it is. I wouldn't do the trade if I didn't love the trade. It's bloody hard graft, like a lot of trades are. You think it's the physical element, what the customer doesn't necessarily see. The physical element of the job is hard. I've damaged myself more times than I'd like to imagine. But you think we get beef delivery come in, a body of beef is around 400 kilos. It's got to come in the fridge. That's then got to come out the fridge and come onto the block. And it's these things people don't see. A pig can be anything up to sort of 80 odd kilos, and that's got to come in again. So there's a lot of physical lifting, carrying, and then obviously then you've got the tired element. You're working with knives, let's be honest, and the butcher's knives, most butcher's knives are relatively sharp.
Well, you'd hope so.
You'd hope so, yeah, absolutely. It's a bit ongoing joke in our trade, but I think people don't necessarily see that, and yes, but so it's a labour of love. It has to be, because I think it was, if you didn't love it, I don't think you would do it. It is that element. But I absolutely, as you hopefully you can tell, I absolutely love the trade. I wouldn't swap it for the world right now, to be honest with you. It's dangerous though. You've got this butchery counter in front of you, and you've got barbecues at home, and you're going, oh. Like, I think the ongoing joke, my team always take the mick out of me for this one as well. My wife, I have to text my wife to get money to put on the card, because she knows what I'm like. Money on the card, that's it. I'm coming home with like probably about me.
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, Simon, I'm exactly the same. So I'll nip into the butcher's and I'll think, right, I need some chicken breast for tonight, or whatever it might be.
Yeah,
and I'll come home. Yeah, exactly. I'll go in there to spend a fiver, and I'll go out spending 50 quid, and I've got something else on.
Now put that to my shoes. So I don't know if you've seen my social media, but if you look in my fridge when you've got 3-4 bodies of beef hanging up, and you walk in and go, oh right, what do I want for dinner?
Just take a whole side of beef home and just.
Do you know what? It's been so tempting. It's so tempting. What do we do? I don't know. Again, I'll be wrong. I don't know. I can't remember the name of the steak. And I'm sure people, when we put it live, will hopefully help me out. But we did one. It was more of a joke over the summer, where you take what we know as a trade, the top bit. So the top bit is your leg of beef, basically. So I don't know if you can imagine a leg of beef. So it's kind of, imagine a leg of lamb and make it about 20 times the size. Yeah? So if you imagine on the top of the lamb, so where the H-bone sits, we've got the flat here. So what we do with the beef and that, we take this one big steak across the whole slice. So this thing is literally like this, by about this deep. And I've never been so tempted to chuck that on the fire pit. And so again, it was for the trade. We have that flexibility to have some fun as well.
Yeah.
Cut things like that, and just whack that in the counter. I think it worked out about 25 kilo steak, I think, in the end.
Wow.
So yeah, as you can tell, it's 100% labor of love. What we do is just, and again, I'm lucky. I'm not gonna sit here and go, I am lucky. I've fallen on my feet with A, where I am, B, the people I work with, and being physically able to have this affiliation with the farmers that I'm working with, and the contacts. there is a hell of a lot of luck sort of falling into that. Not every butcher has the capabilities. I'm not saying capabilities of their skill set, but the physical capabilities of the space, the time, to actually be able to do what we do. So yeah, there is a massive element of luck. So
actually, the contact with the farmers, and I'd love to just touch upon that, and then we could go back to the kind of secondary cuts and all that in a minute. But so in some of the other episodes, one that's not yet to be aired, I recorded earlier this week, although by the time this comes out it'll be weeks ago, with Jack from Jack's Meat Shack. We interviewed Genevieve Taylor earlier in the summer, and where we did a summer special, and we were just talking about the quality of British beef, and we're actually we were comparing it to US corn-fed beef, and obviously our grass-fed beef is obviously a lot leaner, but it's a better flavor. So I'm interested from your point of view, when you're saying about 100% traceability, you've got local contacts with local farmers, how important that actually is to the customer and the quality of the beef that you could serve.
Okay, well, I think there's several different areas to that one question. So let's just sort of take each area in its turn. So let's do sort of the quality. Let's do first of all sort of UK v USDA, for argument's sake, for America. UK beef, it's been challenging. Well, I work with 100% pasture fed, certified pasture for life. I work directly with pasture for life as well, so I represent as a butcher once a month meetings with all these guys. So I'm a massive advocate, as you know, with pasture for life. Though it's been very, very challenging. You put a pasture for life brisket, let's use that as an example, against a USDA. Well, let's not even use USDA. Let's just use an American grain-fed brisket. The intermuscular marbling of the American brisket, you're never going to beat that. It's incredible, and for your barbecue enthusiast, it is going to cook incredible. It's going to stay moist. It's going to tick all of those boxes that you want to tick for a brisket. Though I kind of sit on the other side of that fence, that I want to support the pasture for life scheme. I want to support pasture fed beef for several reasons. First of all, actually on the meating reason, I actually do believe it tastes better. I think it's got more earthiness, more natural flavors to it, as my personal perspective to it. I think the beef tastes like beef. You don't need to muck around with it too much. Again, if you look through my social media, I try and not do too much heavy dry rubs or sauces or anything like that, because in my eyes, the quality of the pasture fed beef shouts through, and you don't necessarily need that to go on top of that. The other one, which I won't go too in depth because it going for years on it, but environmental impact is absolutely huge right now. We're all seeing. Again, I'm sitting here in Kent, looking out my window. It's currently 20 degrees still outside, and we're nearly November. In without getting my high horse too much, if that doesn't shout there's something wrong with our current climate, then what is? We all know what's been going on in the industry with beef, and the reputation that beef has got predominantly throughout the industry of being this nasty methane forming, planet destroying animal. So I think there needs to be that change towards that pasture system, where it's a lot less intensive grazing. The herds are a lot smaller. That I think definitely, again, for me, that's another massive influence, is going for that way. So it's been like, go back to sort of the quality. It's been a battle. When we first started with pasture fed, I was getting some bodies coming through that, to be honest, I don't really want to be too nasty, but they were only as good for dog food. We had bodies come through that in a trade windows coverage, so that's the fat cover. They come through looking like venison, like just no fat on them. And you try and put a Fall River beef up with no fat on it against a grain finished or a grain fed, and it's worlds apart, isn't it? So we've been working super hard with the farmers to try and understand, as a butcher and the end user, what are we trying to look for? How do we get the pasture systems to be able to finish their animals good enough to get the right amount of fat cover on it, the right kind of intermuscular marbling, and it goes so in depth. I'm having some really interesting conversations at the moment with researchers, looking at traditional breeds, how much has that had an impact in actually using our own heritage traditional breeds against crossbred animals is actually making the finished product and the pasture system much, much better. And I'll give you an example of that. I had some belted Galloway come in probably back at the beginning of summer. It was an older animal, so again for the listeners on here, so an average cow in the UK will go to slaughter non-commercial, let's put it that way, probably be 27, 28, 29 months. Commercial could be anything as short as 18 months to go into slaughter. Anything after 30 months in a trade, it goes to what we know as OTM, so over 30 months. Now, some of us are old enough to remember BSE when that kind of hit, the big scare in the beef industry that hit huge, and you know, remember T-bones disappearing off the shelves and all of that. Well, what happened when BSE kind of hit? They anything over 30 months old, they have to test for BSE. So what that means is they have to take the backbone out, test the spinal cord. So most farmers will try and keep their beef now under 30 months, because when you take the backbone out of an OTM animal, it's the skill of the slaughterman obviously to get it neat and tidy. But some of the jobs I've seen have been absolutely horrendous. You know, you're cutting into primal cuts if they get it wrong. You know, it's just not great.
Right.
But that's kind of divulging off. So that's just kind of give a bit background on where we're at. But this belted Galloway, anyway, was not only an OTM, so over 30 months. It was a 9-year-old pasture raised belted Galloway. Not just pasture raised as well. It was raised on rare pasture. So what we know as conservation grazing. So the animal isn't being necessarily bred for the meat trade. It's being bred as a conservation animal. It churns up the ground, new fauna comes through the ground, and it's that biodiversity of the breeding program. Anyway, we were fortunate to get our hands on this 9-year-old belty, and oh my god, if you again just shout on my Insta, if you get to go on my Instagram, scroll through to about back at the beginning of summer, there's a couple of pictures I put up of the top side, and it's way better than any Wagyu that I've ever seen in the UK. It's probably got more marbling than any sort of A1 Wagyu. This thing was incredible, and that's 100% pasture. So going back to the original kind of the breeding on it, what I'm kind of looking at is actually my again, it's opinion, but my opinion is that the British native breeds that haven't been crossbred finish much better on grass than they will on grain. So whether that be a purebred Aberdeen Angus, whether that would be a pure Sussex, whether that be a pure Belty, and by looking at that philosophy, working with the farmers that we're working with who've got these pure breeds, we're now at the stage where I firmly believe the quality that's coming through is fantastic. Now, controversially on that, of course, a lot of these breeds, they won't have a lot of that intermuscular marbling. The belted does, because that's the nature of that animal. It's like Wagyu, isn't it? Let's be honest. Wagyu, for all the fallacies of people, you know, it's fed with this and done with this. The breed naturally has a lot of fat in its muscles. Yeah. That's the breed. Yes, you know, there's ways of enhancing on that. Grain is always going to enhance on that, but that's the breed. And that's the same for Belties. Aberdeen Angus doesn't necessarily have all that much, you know, but it does have a really good outer covering of fat. So it's the skin, again, the skin of the butchery. So when the animal comes in, looking at that animal, right, how long does it need to age for? What's the best parts to age? And what parts do we need to use quick? So that kind of goes interlinks between on the pasture as well. So every animal that comes through from pasture is going to be slightly different. You know, you haven't got that controllability that you've got on a grain finished or a grain fed animal. You know, again, trying without getting too scientific on it, a grain fed animal will predominantly be weighed in before slaughter. So they'll hit a certain weight and then it'll be taken to slaughter. Whereas pasture, the farmer's out there with his hands on the back of the animal going, right, how much fat has it got? It's, you know, yes, they weigh it, but it's mostly it's intuition, sense, understanding it, looking at the conformation when the animal's alive on the field, you know, how hunched up it, how long are the legs, all of those kind of things. Then it's down to the skill of the butcher to understand about the aging of it. So if an animal comes in and it hasn't got a lot of coverage on it, so outer fat, that animal's never going to age. You know, it's going to hang for a couple of weeks and it almost starts to go moldy before it will go age. So it's really kind of using our own interpretation to go, that animal, I'm going to leave that animal for 6 weeks and then it'll be absolutely at its premium to eat, or actually that animal needs to be cut relatively quick. And that's the beauty of having a butcher, isn't it? Because we can talk to each one of our customers and go, actually, I recommend this, or the brutal honesty, I don't recommend this. And this goes back to the pasture, I suppose, is actually, you know, and again, my bosses know and quite happy to say this because, you know, we work very closely together. But if the brisket conversation comes up and the customer specifically comes in for brisket for their barbecue, and the pasture fed brisket that I've got isn't, in my eyes, good enough to cook low and slow, and we haven't, let's say, got an alternative like a chuck, then I will say to them, look, why don't you try one of these other companies, recommend another company and say, look, try them, try the USDA or try the grain finished, because that will actually give you a better product. Because I think, I firmly believe in open honesty, integrity. That's, that's surely what it's about, because I know that customer will still come back.
I was just about to say, yeah, that's quite important, isn't it? That you build a relationship with your customer, and like you said, I suppose your whole reputation is on the quality of your butchery and quality of the meat that you serve and the advice that you give. So it is better to be open and honest and actually say, well, I wouldn't recommend this, or I do recommend this, or I definitely wouldn't do this, but let me tell you to do this instead.
Yeah, 100%. I wouldn't want to run the butchery in any other way. I don't see the point in trying to pull the wool over a customer's eyes just to get sale. You'll get that immediate sale, but that customer's probably not going to come back, and he's probably going to tell another 10 customers, don't go there. The meat we have there was awful. So, I'd rather lose that initial sale by being honest, for them to come back. Well, thank you for that recommendation, but we've come back. So
yeah,
it's got to be that way. It's got to be that way in my eyes. And meat varies, doesn't it? It's not always the same. So let's just, if it's not right, then do something else. We can always do something. That brisket that wasn't right necessarily for low and slow barbecue, what might be ideal for a pot roast for someone else who comes in. Yeah. So there's always something you can do. And so yeah, go back to sort of original. So pasture fed is where I'm at. Certainly where I'm at. And as you can see again by my social, massive advocate of it. And again, it goes flavour for me, primarily environmental impact. And I'll touch delicately on the health side of it because there's still more research going into it. But we had proven a few months ago the omega-3 levels within pasture, and we can actually now sell pure pasture-fed beef. We can sell as a source of omega-3, which is absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. I was buzzing when we had that meeting. So not only is it ethically friendly, not only is it tasty, I can also sell it. It's good for you. It's
health brain functions.
Brilliant, isn't it? You had that scientifically proven. It's taken, I think it was a 6-year project to get to that letter of sign off to say yes, it contains X amount of omega-3. And there's, as you can imagine, there's a multitude of other projects going along with pasture as well at the moment. So of course, absolutely advocate. Back to the American grain fed. Yeah, of course I enjoy grain fed. It's got a unique flavour to it, hasn't it? But I think the older I get, I suppose, and the more I'm eating the grass fed, the less I'm enjoying grain fed. I sometimes it kind of leave you almost that kind of like fatty residue, if that makes sense. Whereas I think the grass, I'm going to say grass fed, pasture fed is a lot more clean and a clean finish. But it's subjective, isn't it? Let's be honest. I'm not here to preach people's taste. Everybody's taste is slightly different. And everybody likes certain different things. I can only preach
and budgets are different as well, because again, I've gone on to try and find some certain types of USDA prime, and you're talking hundreds of pounds for a piece of brisket,
and I don't quote me, but was you at that bit of sizzle when we did that, where I had the bone-in brisket against the USDA brisket right back at the beginning on the demo stage?
No, I think I missed that.
Well, that's really interesting. So at the very beginning, I think it was the first one that Ant done. It was bone-in brisket, which was local, and I think it might probably quote me wrong, but I'm sure he said to me it was either longhorn or shorthorn brisket on the bone. And the next set was a bag of USDA brisket. Now the USDA brisket was about that big. The bone-in brisket was like this. So first of all, there was like this world of difference. Christ. And even the guy, and again, he's going to kill me for getting this wrong, but the guy who's flown across from America who cooks hundreds of briskets a week looked at his bone-in brisket and was like, wow. But yeah, and then I was standing with one of the guys that come down in the butchery trade, a guy called Dave. He's very high up in the bookers group. He's been a butcher for more years than he'd probably like me to mention. He's exceptionally well respected in the industry, and he was saying, even at cost amount, I think he was saying they're about 18 quid a kilo at cost. And that's before you put your margins on for retail. It's ludicrous. Brisket at cost for me at the moment is around about 10.80, 10.90. at cost. So
it's nearly double then, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's big. That's not small. That's not small numbers.
no, and that's it. And again, I'm sure we're going to come on to it, like we said earlier, about the fails when you're paying that money for, say, USDA, and you fail. Oh God, like, not only have you got the embarrassment of having just failed, but you've also known you've just thrown a lot of money away for that fail. And let's be honest, the current climate we're sitting in, I don't think a lot of people can really justify that right now. I know.
No.
I certainly can't. I don't mind a fail, because you've got to fail to learn, haven't you? But I'd rather fail on something that was a little bit cheaper than £100 a kilo of brisket.
Yeah, absolutely. Just out of interest, then, obviously over the last few years for you, with customers coming in, are you seeing more people coming in and asking? I don't necessarily just mean low and slow cuts, but just asking for cuts to be cooked outside, outdoors on grills. Are you finding there's an upwards trend in that?
Oh my God, I'm massively. Now, I don't know whether it's a biased view because of the microclimate that I work in. Just kind of put it in a roundabout scheme. I work in a huge farm shop. It's Kent's like foodie heaven. 6,000 square foot of just incredible produce. A deli that's got probably more cheese than Harrods.
Wow.
So come and check us out. We'll go to that later. But because of that, we get a lot of people coming in that do a lot of barbecuing. I'm trying to think of a lot of high-end barbecuing. I can't think of the terminology to use on that. So I see a very mixed view on it, but there has been a massive change. Yeah, massively. I think I would say percentage of customers over the weekend, you're probably at least 30-40% of the customers every weekend are coming in for barbecue, and that's 300 odd days a year.
Wow.
I think the biggest trend has changed, that for a lot of people now, it's not just this, the sun's out, summer's hit, let's barbecue. A lot of people, it's become now a hobby, a passion. Let's do this every weekend, most nights. Let's experiment. Get asked the questions, how can I cook my turkey on my barbecue? That's massively common nowadays. So yeah, I think the trend's huge. And again, the way I set my butchery window up very much kind of hopefully reflects that trade as well. So we've always got those options that throughout the year that you can use in the barbecue. I think cuts have changed as well. So I think let's say it's a stereotypical British barbecue. Your burnt bangers, your burnt burgers, your drums pink in the middle still, and everything tasting of paraffin. I remember them days. I think those days have changed, haven't they?
Oh yeah, definitely. From when I was a kid, and that's exactly where we went for our. That's exactly what our barbecues were.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I've got fond memories of that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's almost like dicing with death every time you eat sausage, but
that's other the paraffin or the undercooked sausage.
Yeah, that's it. Oh God, how much lighter fluid do people need to use? Anyway, it's like
I remember very first, even before chefing, very first when I got my first house with my wife and doing our first barbecues and pouring a whole bottle of lighter fluid over, and the flames about 10 foot high. But sort of back to the original, I think the trend has changed. I'm getting asked for now a lot more whole cuts. So tri-tips is a great example. Go back to the whole chuck. We're not talking like 1 kilo, 2 kilo joints, whole Boston butts, Thor's hammer again. Those kind of things are becoming a lot more popular, and have done over the last maybe 3 to 4. I say 3 to 4 years. We had COVID in 2 years of that, so maybe 5 or 6 years have become a lot more popular. Don't get me wrong, we still get the people coming in, sausages and burgers. I think burgers is an interesting one. The burger industry as a whole, whether that be restaurants or cook at home, is just still, I don't know how, it's still escalating each week. I can't quite get to grips of how the market's saturated now with incredible burger joints, and I don't even know where to go and eat a burger now because you've got so many bloody good burger joints. Like, where do I go?
Well, it just shows us Brits love burgers, right?
It does, but look, I've had to almost rein back, kind of divulging off the original question, sorry, but I've had to rein back on the burgers. And again, I found I'm lucky enough that we've got a local burger place that has been around for a while, but is just an independent, not chain. Well, he's a chain. He's got 2 restaurants, and he is admittedly opening one in London, but all he does is specialise in bloody brilliant beef, lettuce, tomato, and just a very nice sauce. And you know, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with these burgers that are stacked about 15 feet high and for everything else, but goes back to my kind of point on grass-fed or pasture-fed and quality. You know, give me a burger that's just really good quality beef, bit of salt and pepper, great bun, fresh lettuce, fresh tomato. What more do you want? But that's that again. That's their opinion. You know, it's way on. But it kind of goes back to that question on the barbecue. You know, burgers are very, very popular. We over the summer period, Christ, we could do up to like 1,000 burgers a week.
Wow.
Which is good for us because it goes back to that secondary cut. You know, over the summer period, yes, we all sell Thor's Hammer and Chuck, that kind of thing, but you still got a lot of products that you won't sell. And it goes back to the brisket. If the brisket's not good enough for low and slow, but it does make a bloody good burger. So into the burgers it goes. So you know, it swings and roundabouts. But
nothing's wasted.
No, and again, that's a really good point. No waste. I hate waste. You know, waste is just. As you see again on social media, I'm down physically visiting these farms. You know, I'm going down and seeing the hard work that these guys, or women and men are putting into their trades. And Christ, like, I think I work hard as a butcher. I don't work anything like these farmers work. You know, they're up at 2 o'clock in the morning and going to bed at 2 o'clock at night, and they don't stop. it's nuts. All to get that meat on our table. So. It's my job in the butchery to make sure that we respect that and use up as much as physically possible. You know, we sell majority of the bones because they make great stock, great sauces, dog bones, whatever else. As much as the trim as well. You know, even the dry aged trim. You know, we'll go into like the African sausages because that's the best part for the buoys. So it's just trying to be really calculated, and that almost goes back to what we were saying with Becky earlier about the hanging as well, getting that hanging to the right state of hanging, you know, because you don't want to create that too much wastage, but you want to create the product to be the best product it is. So it's just having that intuition, isn't it? And that goes through every one of the animals. Doesn't mean, you know, we're strictly talking about beef at the moment, but you know, bush is far more than beef, isn't it? You know, lamb will be exactly the same. You know, we've got outlets for so many different products for lamb. Again, if it's lamb burgers, you know, straightforward lamb and fresh mint and a bit of feta burger, that kind of thing, or burgers, or you know, that kind of area. But it's just about not creating waste, and this is where barbecue comes in absolutely ideal, because it gives you an outlet for so many things, whether it be in the summer period, you've got X amount of drumsticks left, you know, for some reason they seem to have dropped out of fashion. Well, you chuck a really good jerk marinade on, they're flying out the door. Barbecue has a lot to answer in the UK right now, and it's brilliant to see the way the scene is exploding. It's super exciting.
And I'm really glad to see that it's actually the 365 is as well, that actually you're not just experiencing those peaks during the summer, because most people that are into barbecue are literally every day, come rain or shine.
100%. And I think for me, again, it goes back to labour of love of the butchery. I've got a labour of love of barbecue and outdoor cooking. And again, I try and cook outdoors as much as physically possible. As much as it's possible. It's difficult living a crazy lifestyle where I'm hardly at home at all. But we did the steaks on the fire pit. And there's a fail for you. So we did the steaks on the fire pit, and I've got this really old rusty look fire pit, which I bought from I think it was the Range a few years ago. I think it cost me like 30 quid, but it looked aesthetically nice. It's done me all right, but I cooked the steaks and the whole bottom fell out of it.
Whilst you were cooking?
Yeah, so I've got this great big hole in the bottom of this fire pit now. I'm like, oh. So there's a fail for you, but it sits outside all year long, and of course it's going to rust through. But yeah, again, like you say, it's this 365, isn't it? I think the other interesting one with the all year long is it goes back to economy. Again, I know my boss won't mind me for saying it, but we're quite funny actually. He took we've got the Mini Max egg at work that we lend out to staff, that they can basically take it back with them. And he's had it for a while now, and he's like, actually, it's been more economical to use the egg than it has to be turning my oven on every day. He said a bag of charcoal's lasting me over a week. And I think that's going to be, I don't know how big that's going to be, but I think that's going to be a bit of a thing coming up where, you know, with gas prices are going up and up and up, and electricity is going up and up and up. Actually, for the barbecue community, it's brilliant. It's much more cost effective for us to cook outside. You know, throw a few charcoals on, and happy days. So I think, you know, the economy is going to have an impact, isn't it?
If you've been looking or thinking about an outdoor kitchen, then look no further than AOS Outdoor Kitchens.
They are the South's leading outdoor kitchen design and installation specialists.
Their extensive showroom is based just outside Bournemouth on the Dorset-Hampshire border, and as well as numerous in-store displays, also features a live outdoor kitchen where they cook every week on Kamado grills, pizza ovens, and all filmed and shown on YouTube.
They offer a wealth of knowledge on how to transform your patio into the most incredible outdoor dining area with styles and options to suit every budget, and you can guarantee they will be able to create something perfectly suited to you and your home.
They stock and supply everything that you're going to need for outdoor cooking, including barbecues, Kamado ovens, pizza ovens, outdoor fridges, and every accessory that you would need to become the ultimate outdoor chef.
So if you want to make yourself the envy of your friends and neighbours, get in touch with them today to arrange a consultation and take the first step in transforming your back garden into the most incredible entertainment space.
Visit aoskitchens.co.uk. And also, I think, you know, where perhaps people that are probably, you know, into barbecue, inverted commas, you know, if you're buying a barbecue, again, you don't have to spend thousands of pounds on a barbecue, but certainly one that's got good heat retention.
Yeah,
so you are using less charcoal, is so much more economically viable, isn't it? Yes, you might have to pay a little bit more out the front, but I've got barbecues that have lasted me over 10 years.
Yeah, but that's it. You pay out the front, but you're going to get it back at the back end of it. Yeah. You know, and again, I'm not going to be brand specific on it because for everybody who knows me, they know what I use. But I'm not stuck up to a brand. Yeah, I was fortunate enough to go with Egg purely because of the background of where I worked and doing bits for them. So, but you know, there's so many good Kamado style barbecues now out in the market. You know, some are horrendously expensive, admittedly, but you know, there's a lot of affordable, you know, Kamados out there. And I think like heat retention is the answer, isn't it? You know, it's finding one of those barbecues that's got a good heat retention on it. It'll last you forever. You know, you look after it in the right way. Don't put any paraffin on it. Let's be honest. Massive mistake. But you look after it, and yeah, and they will last you. You know, I think, you know, mine. I think my large now is probably 12 years old now, and it's still going strong. You know, there's nothing wrong with it, and you know, it's still light it up. And you know, my small I use 3 or 4 nights a week at the moment, realistically. You know, and again for what I'm cooking on it as well at the moment, you know, I don't cook a lot of slow cooks right now because of, again, time wise. But it's ideal to throw some steaks on there, that kind of thing. Whole chicken on there doesn't take long, does it? And the efficiency of lighting it as well. It doesn't take long to light, does it? It's like 20 minutes door to door, really, to get it hot and ready to go, temperature controlled. Yeah. So yeah, I think spend the money up front. You don't need to go crazy. I would say would be my suggestion. You don't need to go to, you know, to the top end brands or brands within the name, but look, just, you know, something that's got good heat retention, and it will be a godsend.
Just on the egg specifically, I don't have an egg, but how did you? I think they had it at Sizzlefest this year. They definitely did last year. But have you seen that supersized one? It was like essentially like a bucket that a fully grown man gets in.
I worked Metopia. Again, I'd be lying to say how many years ago it was. As you get older, you lose track of these things. But I worked for Green Egg at Metopia, and funny enough, actually, it was before I'd only just become a butcher. I wasn't affiliated with Pasture for Life, but the USP for Metopia was grass-fed v grain-fed. And then basically, the long and short of it, we had a bank of mini maxes that each one of us had a station, cooking the steaks, going up, sitting down with a customer, and it was a blind taste, you know, what tastes better. And anyway, that was that. But we had the double XL egg next to us, and my God, like I even struggled to lift the lid on that thing. It is so
big.
I can't remember any bags of charcoal. I think it took like two and a bit bags of charcoal or something. I can't remember, but it was ridiculous. We had again, if I remember rightly, we had a whole chuck and blade. So this thing was about 25 kilos worth of meat on the double XL. I think one of the guys who was working with egg for me, Nick, at the time, was saying that you could get 6 suckling pigs on it. There's no need for it. Like, don't get me wrong, it would look good in your garden, but I don't think I'd ever use it. Right? And again,
well, you could substitute as a hot tub.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good point. That's whilst you're on the size of it as well. Customers ask me, we retail egg, admittedly, and customers ask me about the size, and I think customers coming in, XL, and I actually know, like, stick to the Minimax or the large, because actually I think those sizes, not just in the egg, but in the whole range of commandos, actually they're more efficient. I think they light better, and I think the temperature control is better on them as well. So I was fortunate enough, like I say, I got my large about 12 years ago, and then I thought actually get the Minimax to sit outside next to it. If I'm doing a big family barbecue, then it gives me 2 different cooking temperatures. Or again, like a weeknight. So like I said, I've got 3 kids. My wife, we own a coffee shop, and believe it or not, we own a dance school.
Busy man.
My wife works pretty much 8 in the morning till 10:30, 11 at night, Monday to Saturday. So from finishing up the butchery to running home to going up to dance school to pick up the kids after dance lessons to get back, time's a nightmare. So actually the Minimax is brilliant because you can just chuck a lighter on it. Right, girls, we're going to chuck some steak on there, or let's quite be controversial, go back to the old school barbecue, chuck some sausages on it, that kind of thing. So it's size wise, but I think it goes back to my point. If I'd had the XL, I think there's a psychological element to me going, actually, I don't think I'd want to come home every night and light it, because you just got that visual element. It's so big, even though we know it's economical. I just don't think I'd want to. If that kind of makes sense, anyway. It's just that.
Do you know what it does? Funny enough, so I've got a number of different barbecues, a few different brands, and I was saying to someone asked me about my wish list, and all 3 of them, the top 3 were all big barbecues. Yeah. But actually thinking about it, again, I'm wife and 2 kids. Some nights, the kids eat school dinners. They just want a sandwich when they get home, or my wife doesn't want to eat what I eat. But I don't necessarily need to fire up my massive Traeger IM 885, or I don't need to fire up my big Weber 57. Sometimes it would be nice just to have like a little tabletop grill or something, or almost like like the little like yakitori type grill, Japanese grills that are just small, that just perfect size for just one steak on there, or cut 2 sausages or whatever, that you're not actually having to fire up a whole oven or a grill or
I think you're right. I think this point. I think again, that goes back to the fire pit for me. That was kind of a multi-use as well. It was like, again, like take last night for instance, I could chuck some logs on there. Again, not going crazy. Looking at economics, so 2 or 3 logs, because you're not going to cook. You've got a nice ambient afterwards when it doesn't break, and a great cooking service. But you've got reasons for lighting it as well, and it's not huge. You're not, like you said, you're not lighting up this gigantic barbecue for a couple of steaks, because. So I think that again, it goes back to, like you say, economics as well. The yakitori style barbecues, they look amazing, and they're not crazy expensive. You can pick them up now for for a pretty good price, and the temperatures. Have you used one?
No, I haven't. No, I've seen a few people starting to use them, but I've heard good things.
They're nuts. We got one at work. Must have been 2019, because it's pre-COVID. And again, we had a yakitori menu on our outside dining, because it was kind of hand in hand butchery to outside. Like the heat that these things produce is it's immense. It's they're not joking with the yakitori. You can cook yakitori within seconds. They're good fun. I'd highly recommend them. And again, for the price bracket, they don't take a lot of charcoal either. I know you can go as crazy as you want, and you can go to order this Japanese charcoal. I can't remember the name of it, Bioshen, something like that.
Bichichan,
Which I think
Bichichan, sorry,
that's the one. I've had the luxury of using a couple of times in the chefing industry, which is stuff's the same. It is worth the money, but wow. But it goes back to, like you say, it's economics, isn't it? I'm a barbecue advocate of cook to what you can afford as well. You don't need to. I started out years ago barbecue. when barbecue started becoming a passion before kind of going to eggs, you know, I had a really cheap offset, again, range model smoker that I would just sit outside loading logs on, hoping for the best. It's got no decent seal on it, no decent, you know, temperature range was, well, you know, it was kind of like teaching yourself, if I put a thing of water here and I use this amount of fire, I can actually bring it down to a and again, for me, I think that's that luxury. It's trying to also understand about the cooking skills. You know, even take just a standard kettle barbecue with lid. You know, the whole offsetting, put your charcoals to one side, put a pan of water on the other side, and you can create a convection by doing that. And you can control, you're not going to burn. You can be able to a certain extent, you're going to be able to do low and slow. So yeah, I know that's a really good area for me. I love that. I find it really, really fascinating. Who was the guy? One of my favourite books I was introduced to in my last chefing job. And again, I would imagine in our community, most people will know, you know, Francis Morman, the Argentinian barbecue chef. What a legend! You know, I got his two books years ago. You know, Seven Fires and Seven Fires: The Recipes. And I think I've read Seven Fires 50, 60 times now, just back and forwards. And I absolutely love this idea of, well, 7 fires, the 7 different ways of cooking over fire. And that kind of links into when someone, you know, saying to me, "Oh, we've only got a drum barbecue, or we've only got, you know, a kettle barbecue." Well, you can do the same. You know, you can cook the same way. Just understanding these different principles of how fire works, how to get that fire to work in your favor. Yeah, and I couldn't recommend that book enough, to be honest with you, because that really taught me, even away from the chefing industry, because there was stuff in there that in the chefing industry just wouldn't relate, and it was brilliant. So yeah, it's kind of goes back to economics. You know, you can buy, it doesn't matter what you spend on a barbecue, you know, as long as and again, I'm going to be I will push Marcus out on this one, but I'm a big advocate of, let's get rid of disposable barbecues, because I don't see a need for them. Let's lose them. Perfect.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Yeah, completely.
Especially yeah, I
was going to say, especially yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, with so many barbecues now that are portable, good quality, you get the heat retention, you get all the, you know, they're a similar size to what a throwaway barbecue is. What is the need?
There isn't
for them.
No, and it goes back to, I keep relating to the range, because to be honest with you, in the summer, I know it's about 365, but in the summer, their range is really bloody good. You know, from chimneys to barbecues, you know, that aren't crazy expensive. You know, they do a ceramic. Is it the Acorn? I think they do, or something like that. It's another red one anyway. But yeah, I quite like that, because it goes back to, you know, that's where I started out. You know, I think my offset barbecue cost me £90. And it lasted me for 3-4 years, probably. You know, we looked after it. I bought a cover for it, admittedly, and you know, we looked after it, cleaned it out after every use, and you know, and it was great. And it was a great learning tool, and it was just more than learning tool. It was fun. You know, it's all right. It goes into what we're going to go into in a minute. You know, there was plenty of mistakes.
Let's talk about that now. Obviously, it's one of the things, as I said, we hold very, very dear on the podcast is the barbecue fails. You mentioned one earlier about essentially the bottom of your fire pit falling through, but I suppose, again, with an extensive chefing career as well, I'm sure there was probably a few even fails from there. So tell us all about them, Simon.
Let's go with my biggest one. This is not barbecue, unfortunately, but we'll go with my biggest fail. This goes back probably nearly 30 years now, so it's quite an old story. So anyway, I was starting out in a very, very well-known restaurant in Kent. We were doing, I know it's controversial, but bear in mind it was a high-end restaurant at the moment. Then we were doing chicken liver and foie gras parfait. Okay. We all know the cost of foie gras is just ridiculous. So again, I won't give you the whole recipe, but it was basically, you know, it's a holdover foie gras, some chicken livers, lots and lots of pork, that kind of thing, blended up, put into a tureen, and then into a bain-marie set up and in the oven. And you bake it very, very slowly in the bain-marie until it's set, and then it comes out, you butter it, and it looks very nice and it's very tasty. But so biggest fail. So I think I can't remember. I think I put 6 of these in the oven. I put it in the oven. It must have been about 2:30 in the afternoon. So just as lunch services come up to a wraps. Anyway, being young, eager to get out on a break, wrapped my knives up, ran out. I didn't live that far away from the restaurant, so I'd run home. Completely forgot that I put these things in the oven. Got back into the kitchen, must have been about 5:30 to set up for evening service, and these things were knackered, scrambled through and through. The money that I'd thrown in the bin, and I won't tell you what my head chef said because I don't think we can redo that on air. But I wasn't in the best. It wasn't in the best books, so let's put it that way. So we're up 6 bars or half-ays.
So that's a lot of money.
yeah, that was. I was in the bad books for that one. Let's put it that way. So I think that's probably my biggest fail. I think other than that, in general, there's lots of. I think there's fails every day. I think social media has and I'm the worst for it. You only post on social media what looks good, yeah. But
most of the time, yeah.
Most of the time, you don't necessarily post on social media the bits on the side that are burnt out to control that. But I had one fail. Actually, I did put on social media, and I hadn't realised I'd actually taken a photo of it and so I put it up. But I did like this KFC style chicken. Super excited, like gone to town, right? So I'd found the recipe for the closest recipe I could find to that KFC crumb. I made my own buns to go with it, the lettuce, you name it. I've gone the whole way. It made my own KFC gravy. Super proud of this, and even got KFC paper to style and started wrapping these things up in. And I've done chips with the side of it, and it wasn't until I don't know what happened, but I put it up on social media. I was super excited with this. Hey, I've gone up to town. And then comments started to come through. It's like, them chips are burnt. They're black. And I was looking and I literally put this photo of these black chips. I just obviously forgotten about. They'd gone black to anything. You
just used a very, very dense pepper rub, right?
Well, of course. Yeah, absolutely. So there's one. Again, that was probably more barbecue. So non-barbecue related again. Pressure cooking fail. Tried to pressure cook oxtail. I think it was fairly new into that kind of scene of cooking. Anyway, cut it out, and it was like there's oxtail soup and there's oxtail puree. And this thing was just like an absolute puree. To be honest, there's the classic ones are burning the bottom of something. And not necessarily showing that on social media. So go through some of my photos. If you look closely, you will see the bottom. You look at it, and it's like this black layer. So, do you know what? I fail. I'm not going to lie. We all fail, and I fail all the time. But I think the skill set is not about necessarily the failing. This is how do you recover from the fail. As long as it's not a catastrophic. Like I've left it in the oven overnight, or I left it in my barbecue overnight. The barbecue's gone up to 300 degrees C, and it's black, and there's nothing to do with it. I think you can always get away with something, Pulled pork's the most classic one, isn't it? The barbecue went out, or it's still not. You can whack the temperature up and roast it.
I especially think at home as well, isn't it? When it's just you and your family.
Yeah,
you'd like to think they're pretty forgiving, and we'll get around it. Slap a bit of sauce on it. I suppose I'm
lucky with my family. My family is forgiving. It's me that beats myself up more than my family. And you're like, oh my god, I wouldn't say a temper because I'm not really a temper, but I've got kind of get angry at yourself, and then it's kind of like, Christ, now what we're gonna do for dinner? Now where I'm gonna go? And the missus is like, oh god, here we go. It's more, I think it's more that kind of personal beat, especially being in the trade for so many years as well. When you do fail, you're like, I know better than this. But like you say, it's not so bad with family. In the restaurant scene, that's a different story. That's
I can imagine.
You don't have time to fail like that, if that makes sense. Again, you some of the busiest restaurants I worked in, you were doing like 200 covers a night. And you didn't have time. You were, I remember services where. I'm not going to lie. I've cried. I've cried in the kitchen as a grown man. When that pressure is that immense, and you've got ticket coming on ticket, and you're just not seeing. You suddenly realise you're not prepped up for it. You haven't got enough of, and it can be the smallest thing in the world. So kind of interlinks to the fail. I haven't diced enough shallots to go in the slot dressing for the oysters. Is a great one, and you don't physically have the time during service to go right, stop, reslice, redo. It's yes, or burning that steak, you know, overcook that steak, and that steak comes back to you because you're at that kind of panic stage as a chef that you just send it out anyway because, oh God, if I can't, I know my chef's going to kill me, so I'm just going to send it out, and it comes back. Those, they're the harsh learnings. That was PTSD.
So I want to completely turn it around now from the fails and the stress of it. What do you absolutely love to cook on the barbecue? What was your favorite thing?
Oh well, I think there's three favorite things I like to cook. Obviously steak, that has to be up there, of course. You know, in the butchery industry, lucky enough to have some bloody amazing steaks on a weekly basis. So
yeah,
I think that's my favorite thing to cook. In terms of, I just enjoy it. I enjoy the aspect of the intuition, you know, knowing when it's done, watching it, understanding it, listening to it. All of those little techniques that kind of go into making that steak absolutely spot on. So steak's got to be my number one, and that, to be honest with you, that would be the dish that will be my last. That would be my last dish, 100%. Steak and chips, no frills, no spills, just steak and chips. Yeah,
sounds good.
And then it sounds really crazy, actually, paella on the fire. I think it's more of a sentimental one. So when my wife and I, you know, we got together and we got married, and we're going back, you know, we've married 20 years this year. So our honeymoon was in the Costa del Sol. Woohoo, you know, great party town there. I wasn't a chef then, I'd never been to a hot country either, so I didn't know anything about food. I knew I enjoy eating food.
Yeah.
And my wife and I, we again, for those of you who know Costa del Sol, you go to the most amazing beach, and coming away from that kind of party pub scene, if you go down to the beach, first thing in the morning when the boat's coming in with these fresh sardines that have been cooked over charcoal, then you go to the restaurants in the evening and they're cooking paella over fire. And I think, you know, I came back, you know, to kind of give you a story. You know, we was eating paella. I think we must have ate it 2 or 3 times on our honeymoon. And it was just kind of like, wow, this is just, I've never eaten anything like this, you know. And then I remember coming back, and so I kind of give you the whole picture, going into Sainsbury's, going, I want to try and cook paella at home. And I wasn't the chef, like I said. I didn't have a clue. I cooked with my mum and my dad, doing bits and pieces, you know, making shepherd's pies and stuff. Yeah. I'd never cooked, but I remember Nick, my wife, and myself pick up this paella rice, and they had a recipe on the back on how to make the. So and again, we'd this isn't barbecue to start, but we'd had, you know, cheap frying pan, etc. You do your first flat, And I remember making this paella, and it was tasty. Don't be wrong; it was, you know, it wasn't a fail. It was nothing like we'd eaten in Spain, but it was tasty and it was a great meal. And it then sort of slowly became an addiction, and it became my wife and I's set meal. And it was like at least once a week we would have paella, and at that point it was always kind of the UK, what's to call it, UK set recipe kind of area. So, you know, it always had chorizo in it because that's what us Brits love. It would always have squid. It would always have chicken, and so, you know, it was very much that kind of bastardized recipe. But it was brilliant, and we had it every week. And I'm going to carry on part of it there. And then I won't give my whole career path, but I was working at my local ski centre because that's my old trade, and then came out of it, and I got a job in the Beefeaters as a chef, and it was brilliant. And we had paella on the menu there in the Beefeaters, and you can imagine, you know, it came out of the packet, but we grilled the chicken, right? And the chicken got this cross smart grill, and it went on the top, and wow, this thing was amazing. Proper little cast iron paella pans used to go out. So this paella passion kind of just expanded and expanded. So let's skip to probably about 5 or 6 years ago. So then I'd really gone into the butchery trade, gone through the whole of my chefing trade, and started to really kind of have this passion about exploring cultures, foods, how things were traditionally done, why you would do things like you do. And then we started, you know, I bought myself a traditional paella pan from where I'm working now, actually, ironically, with the, you know, the proper thin base on it. And then again on my holy fire pit, would put loads of logs on and make the fire, and then start cooking the paella over fire, and then start looking at traditional methods as well. So, you know, why am I putting chorizo in it? Actually, let's look at rabbit. Let's look at other options. And I remember buying the book, the paella book by Phaedon, and reading through that, going, bloody hell, this is intense. Like, they cook and then they put a cloth over it at the end, and actually what they're looking for is that crust on the bottom, and it's now become like this and I'm going to be sort of backtracking what we said about 365 again, but it's more of a summer thing for us now. But it's become like this family summer ritual that we'll have all these ingredients in bowls laid out, the fire pit will be lit, and then we'll go out and the pan will go on, and the oil and the butter will go in the pan, and then we'll start building this paella. And the kids actually love it, because this thing will go in the middle of the table and you've got this like smoky element to it. And so yeah, as you hope,
it's like it's an interactive cook. That it becomes an interactive cook for the family, then, doesn't it?
Massively. It's not only an interactive cook; it's an interactive dining as well, isn't it? Like, you kind of come away from this stereotypical, we must sit around the table and have your food dished up to you on a plate. No, do you know what? There's the paella in the middle of the table. There's a spoon.
Yeah,
always been and help yourself. And so it becomes this whole journey, doesn't it? This whole amazing journey of. From me now is not just about the cooking the paella, going out and sourcing the ingredients. So it's let's go to these farm shops or this fishmongery, and we'll go and source these ingredients. They will come back, then the ritual lighting the pit, getting the pit to the right temperature, understanding, goes back to that 7 fires, isn't it? Understanding at what stage is that pit ready to go. Am I going to put it through when the flames are about 10 foot high still? Well, probably not. Yeah, but am I going to put it through when it's dead? Yeah, and it's just getting that balance. And we all know the paella takes 25-30 minutes, if not a little bit more, to cook, and it's making sure that you get that pan on that right point, that the logs at the right temperature, but they're dying towards that end part of that cook. And it just becomes this really intense kind of fun cook. I think is so. As you can probably tell, it's probably even reverse it. It probably is my favourite.
I was just about to say, the way that you've just explained that's got to be number one. And I'd like you to keep that in mind. Which the next thing I want to go on to is barbecue bingo, and there's a reason I'm asking you these questions first. So, so this is quite a good segue actually, because as I kind of mentioned to you before we started recording, we do this barbecue bingo challenge. So I've just pulled up the screen in front of me.
Yeah.
So
some great ingredients.
I mean, there's no bingo involved. It's a really high tech wheel. But one of the things on there is my signature dish, which is your signature dish, what you're famous for. So the way that you've just explained it, actually paella's already on there. So maybe the steak and chips should be your signature dish. But what we've done is we've added new to this. So all the guests that we've been recording season 4, which you're part of season 4, we're asking them to leave an ingredient. So liver's gone on there, sumac, maple and pecan ice cream, chocolate buttons. So once we've spun this to see what you get, I'd love for you to add an ingredient or a dish to go onto there. So is there anything that sticks out for you that you're a big no or yes, I'd love to have a go at?
To be honest, no, I'll be keen on any of that, to be honest with you. There is quite, it's obviously some favourites on there, but I think just spin it and let's just see what comes up.
Fantastic. Right, let's give this a go.
Fantastic. Excellent.
So this is the first ingredient that was put on by Chris at Big Nose Barbecue, one of the organisers of Sizzle Fest.
Yes.
So fantastic. So he'll be pleased that you've got that to give that a go. So what do you think you're going to try and use sumac with?
With sumac, so we're talking sort of Middle Eastern, this kind of area. So the obvious that are shouting out to me will be fish or white meat, so chicken or pork, something like that. Chicken predominantly. Fish is another good one with sumac. Thinking flatbreads, thinking pomegranates at the moment, or going down that route, or like what's the rice with like kind of nuts and raisins, pilai, is that kind of
pilau,
that kind of area.
That's good.
Maybe like chicken that's been spatchcocked, or even completely boned. yeah, with the sumac broken onto flatbreads, covered with like your pomegranate jewels, keeping it down that route. Yogurt, nice sort of yogurt dressing with maybe a bit of sumac going to the yogurt dressing.
Right. What would you like us to add to this for our next guest?
I'm going to go. This is going to sound quite strange. I'm going to go Szechuan pepper. Really interesting ingredient, and it is. Let's be honest, it is pretty now readily available. Most supermarkets now will stock it within their spice section. So it's not a completely random product, but for me, just to kind of highlight it, so when someone does choose it, it's one of those products I've really got into over the last 3 or 4 weeks. Really massively got into my Chinese style cooking. It'd be interesting to see what people come up with it as well. So, yeah.
And you've also created a new fail for the podcast, which is Owen's spelling fails.
Hey. No, I don't. This is why I'm a chef and a butcher. I'm highly dyslexic, and anything academic was never going to work. So,
oh, there we are. But no, I appreciate that. So, we obviously look forward to what you're going to cook there. I'd like to ask one final question,
yeah,
which could probably be a hard question to answer, but I'm going to give it a go. So it kind of goes right back to the beginning, actually, when you were talking about Thor's hammer and how 6 months ago it wasn't a thing. You couldn't sell them, and now you're selling 4 or 5 a week. What do you think, as we come out of perhaps Christmas, which is going to be more traditional, but moving into 2023, what do you think is going to be the next big barbecue cut or barbecue trend from a meat perspective?
That is really, really difficult. Because I think a lot of the trends, everything's sort of going in circles at the moment. I think in the current economical state, knowing we're going to come out of Christmas where people are going to spend a lot of money still over Christmas because we're all going to want to celebrate. So January, February, March is going to be a much, much tighter 3 months than potentially any of the other years that we've had. So I think it's staying down that theme of secondaries. I think secondary cuts are going to be huge. Secondary steaks, I don't know. I'd like to go back to maybe what we were saying with the chuck. I think chuck, they're going to have a massive revival. I think that's going to be. Unfortunately, I think things like lamb are potentially going to drop off the radar a little bit because lamb is notoriously expensive or deemed expensive.
Yeah.
I think poultry is going to struggle for a little bit. I think price of poultry is going up and up and up, and even look at supermarkets now. We're expensive anyway where I am for the quality that we're using, but I think poultry's. So I think it's going to secondary cuts. Bigger cuts, maybe bulk might have a bit of a revival. My honest answer, I don't know. The trends are changing very, very rapidly. Things are changing on a daily basis right now. People's shopping habits are changing on a daily basis right now. If I'm going to relate this directly to barbecue, then I think the trend will continue with bigger cuts, more cost-effective bigger cuts. So rather than again kilo joints, I think people will probably buy larger, slower cooking joints that will do 2 or 3 meals rather than just your one barbecue night. And I'm hoping as well that trend will really kind of hit off. That people, let's use chuck again as an example, will do that low and slow chuck, but then really now start thinking of leftovers. What can we do with those leftovers? Can we make a ragu? Can it go into a chili con carne? Can it go into a curry? And I'm hoping as well that's where the trend will go. I do think, and this is very, very arrogant for me to say, I do think the trend's going to be led by a lot more social media. The powers of social media right now, not necessarily myself, but look at some of the big players. I think Thor's hammer was set on a social media trend, and I think that's really where the trade's going to be dictated to. But I like to say, I'm hoping it goes to. Well, let's be honest. I'll stick on my high horse. I'm hoping it goes to concentrating on British meat, not necessarily predominantly beef, but British meat, zero importation, supporting our local farmers or supporting our farmers in general, and understanding about less wastage. I think that's really, really where I'm hoping the trend goes. People understanding that actually buy a whole chicken and how many meals can that whole chicken do, making sure we're using up the bones, etc. Taking our life back into full circle, if that makes sense, to what our parents and our parents used to do. Is not a negative in any shape or means. I think if I can put a positive spin on this economic area, I'm hoping that's going to be a positive spin, that we all actually start to rethink about the way we cook, eat, what we're eating. Less takeaways, more home cooking. would be absolutely ideal. So that's, you know, kind of a sig on my high morals on that one, but I firmly.
But I absolutely agree with you. To, you know, in that, for me, I'm reevaluating every time I go to the butchers now. Again, I'm looking at what can I buy that is going to get the best value for money. You know, I've been buying from the butchers as long as I can remember, me personally. But I also need to look at the best way to maximize every single piece of meat that you cook and everything you buy. So I think that's absolutely right to do so.
You know, again, you know, the example for me as well, it's about that bulk cooking as well. You know, give me an example. I've got my mum and dad come here for dinner tomorrow night. And admittedly, it will be on the egg actually, but we're going to do coq au vin, which can be quite an expensive dish. You know, by the time you put sort of pancetta through there, your chicken through there. But actually, to make it more economical, you know, I bought enough to cover 3 meals for the week. So I don't have to buy another 3 meals or another 2 meals. You know, I've got tomorrow night's meal, and then that covers me then for 2 nights when I know I'm running around like crazy. And again, that interrelates to me for another kind of thing where my morals sit of eating healthy. You know, I don't want to be pushed into that corner where I'm having to go to a supermarket to buy a ready meal that's full of not great stuff.
That was very diplomatic.
I know. I was just trying to think of the words. You know, I'm not in the butchery right now, so I can't. But you know what I mean? I want to know what I'm eating, and I want to know. I want to know it's healthy. I think it's probably exaggerating to say I want to know it's healthy, but I want to know the ingredients that are in it. You know. Yes, I'll make some Chinese food that I will put a bit of MSG and stuff like that in it. Trust me, because it flavors them. But I think I just want to know what ingredients I'm cooking with and what's going in. And if I can eat fresh every night, then that's the way of doing it. So it goes back to that bulk cook, almost spend out that money in the initial place for good ingredients, but to bulk cook those ingredients that are going to last then through 2 or 3 meals rather than that kind of 1 meal for one night. So that's kind of where I sit with that. But it's quite idealistic, but I do believe it can work. You know, I'll sit here. I live one, as you said before, I live one of the most craziest lifestyles of busyness. You know, well, so I do. My wife does, and I pick up the slack. Pick up the slack from there. But when people say to me, "Oh, I haven't got time," you know, we've all got the time. You know, it's about being clever. Clever with your menus, and like you say, going into your butchers and buying a big economical cut. You know, pulled pork, we'll say pulled pork, but you know, shoulder of pork, Boston butt, amazingly economical, and you can get how many meals out of it. It doesn't have to necessarily smoked pulled pork, does it? You know, you can pull pork, and that pork can go into a ragu. It can go into a pork and cider casserole. It can go into so many different variations. But you can chuck it on your ceramic barbecue and leave it for however long you want. You can, let's be honest, you can chuck it in your slow cooker. You've got options. So we've all got the time. I mean, it's just kind of making that time and just being clever with it. I think that's just where I sit with it.
So 2 final things then before we go. Is there anything that we haven't spoken about yet that you wanted to sort of talk to or tell our readers before we finish?
I think we've covered quite a lot of things in sort of, you know, in some in depth and some in a bit of a roundabout way, the way conversations always go. You know, again, for me, it's just the passion, really. You know, that's what people understand. You know, why we're doing what we're doing, and for our readers really to have the confidence of coming into us butchers, and don't be afraid to ask. I think is the biggest thing for me. It's just because we've got a counter in front of us, we're not scary. You know, we're 9 times out of 10, we're all exceptionally friendly and bloody keen and passionate about what we do, and we actually want to share our knowledge. So, you know, the thing for me is always ask. You know, if you was to come and see me in Faversham, then ask. You know, come to my fridge. I love it when a customer comes in and says, you know, what can we? You know, we're looking for something. We need inspiration. All right, come into my fridge. Literally, there's, you know, bodies of beef, everything hanging up, and look, like there's nothing to hide. And
it sounds like my idea of heaven.
Absolutely, but that's it. And that's, you know, so that would be the one thing for me is, you know, let's just really kind of highlight this trade, you know, the butchery trade, and just get people to be confident. Also confident understanding that if you come to us as a butchers, not just my butchers, but any butchers that I know of, you don't have to have a whole pack of something. You go in the supermarket and you're dictated to, yeah? You have to have a kilo of mince or 500 grams of mince. You have to have a pack of 6 sausages. Great. Well, goes back to the economics. You don't always want that. Come to the butchers, and I've got customers who come in every week without fail, but have like 250 grams worth of mince. That's that's bread and butter to me as a retailer. But it's brilliant because they know they can come in. You can come in and have one sausage. You don't have to come in, and I think that's the beauty of our trade. That's the beauty of what we do, is that flexibility. We can meet we look expensive. You look at the counter, you look at the window, you look at the per kilo prices, and you go, whoa. But it's that realization of a customer that, just because I've got a whole ribeye in the counter, you don't have to have the whole ribeye. You can have a 5-ounce steak off that ribeye, and it's not that expensive. Yeah. So yeah, I think people will get the gist of where I'm kind of coming from on that. But have confidence, come and speak to us, ask us questions. We're more than willing to help you out. So I think
perfect.
That's probably all ready for me to get across.
Great. So you've got that across. Now, where can people find you? So you've mentioned social media a few times, but actually give where people can find you on your Facebook.
Yeah, absolutely. So my butchery, I work for a company called Macknade. It's a farm shop that's based in Faversham in Kent. So we're just off of the A2, just outside of Faversham, probably 15-minute drive from Canterbury, 20-minute drive from Ashford. If you're coming London direction, traffic depending, 45 minutes to the top end of an hour, I would have said, probably less than an hour. That's coming from sort of southeast London direction, probably about an hour from Dover. So we're a food hall. We've got cafe, we've got an amazing deli. Like I said before, the range of cheese on there, I couldn't even tell you how many's on there, but it's just insane. Charcuterie section, where we've got some of the best charcuterie in the world amongst some of the best British charcuterie. We've got then veg, which is local veg where we can, and then we have an amazing imported section as well with the veg. Our owner is Italian, as an Italian owner, so we do get a lot of really high-end Italian produce come through. Right down to the pasta range as well. You've got pastas that you just won't find anywhere else. From small family producers up in the mountains in Italy. It's well worth a visit. Yes, I run the butchery there, but food's my passion, and the shop is insane. You can spend, if you're going to come down, just make sure you take the whole morning, because it's not just a half-hour ship in. It's a good morning out. So yeah, we're Macknade Fine Foods, or Macknade in Faversham in Kent.
Fantastic. Well, Simon, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast, and I look forward to catching up with you again at perhaps another barbecue festival.
We'll get this recipe done with the sumac, and we'll ping that up. So
brilliant. Well, thank you very much for coming on, Simon.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. We'll catch up again.
Speak to you soon. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. That's it for another episode of the Meet and Greet Barbecue podcast. Thanks so much to Simon coming on and talking about all things butchery, as well as cooking in general. He's clearly got a passion for food. So if you're down in the Kent area, please do go out and check out his farm shop and butchery. As ever, we want to hear from you. We want to know what you'd like us to talk about on the podcast. Please do get in touch with us through our social media channels or through our website at Meet and Greet Barbecue Podcast. On the website, we've got our own store with the barbecue merch, the podcast merch, as well as we've got some affiliates where we're working with some fantastic brands such as Thermapen, where it's all about cooking to temperature and not time, to make sure you get the best quality meat cooked at the right temperature. Until next time, keep on grilling.
Today's episode of the Meet and Greet Barbecue podcast is brought to you by AOS Outdoor Kitchens. They are the South's leading outdoor kitchen design and installation specialists.